Hey there, hi there, ho there, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming to us from around the world. I'm Dawn Zoldi, and this is the Drones at Dawn podcast. This is Advanced Air Mobility Month, and I'm so excited to have with us our guest, the editor of eVTOLinsights.com, Jason Pritchard. He's coming to us live from the UK. Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Dawn. Really glad to be here. Looking forward to what's going to be another really interesting discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So, normally we're live, and unfortunately, we couldn't get the technical difficulties worked out in time to do that for today. So unfortunately, we won't have that interaction with the audience. We've got some super fans, some folks that dial in every week, and hopefully they'll come back to YouTube and watch this later. The other thing I'll say for everybody out there, Jason was also our guest on Clubhouse this past week, and honestly, it was so phenomenal. It was probably the most well attended that we've had yet, and the conversation was spectacular. So, for many, many reasons, I'm looking forward to this conversation, Jason. So, thank you in advance, and thank you for what you've already done.
Very kind, Dawn. No, thank you again. It's as we've talked about in the Clubhouse sessions, that it's really important that we have all these discussions both now and going forward. There's a lot of brilliant individuals such as yourself in this space. The more conversations we can have and sharing ideas and expertise is only going to be for the best. So yeah, looking forward to it as always. Thank you.
Well, absolutely. So, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so as you very kindly with the introduction, Dawn, my name is Jason Pritchard. So I'm the editor of eVTOLinsights.com, and I'm a journalist by heart. So I've been doing journalism, media, communications for more than 10 years now. So cut my teeth into sort of daily newspapers over here in the UK. So really sort of learned the essence of a good news story, and then that followed me on to doing a various few roles in public relations and PR. Really focusing on sort of the transport logistics side of things. So already we started to get a bit of an interest into the mobility side of things. And then it wasn't until April 2020 where me and my colleague, who's the founder of eVTOL Insights, Simon Corbett, we were just having a bit of a discussion, both been looking at the eVTOL aircraft and urban mobility markets for several years now. And we thought, why don't we just launch a media brand? Simon had this really good idea that he wanted to explore and to put that forward. He has the sort of the business and marketing side of things, whereas I've got all the sort of the media and communication side that complement his work too. So April 2020, not the best time to launch a media brand given what we knew happened. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, of course, but we set up eVTOL Insights to really educate and inform the industry really about the market, what's happening. So we started off with news about one story a day. We launched the weekly podcasts, of which you were a brilliant guest a few months ago, Dawn, as well. And we've since grown and grown and grown. And we really wanted just to develop the industry and the community in that respect. And it's been an absolute roller coaster. We've had such positive feedback from people all across the world. And it's been really, really grateful to see because without the support of the industry, we wouldn't be where we are today. So where we've come from then to where we are now, we do 2 to 3 stories a day. We do the weekly podcasts. We do Clubhouse, as you rightly mentioned, Dawn, every Thursday at 5 o'clock British summertime. But I'm trying my best to involve myself in a few more discussions because Thursday showed it's such a brilliant opportunity to talk with more people, such as yourself as well. We also have the WhatsApp and the Signal groups just to give people another way of getting news, as well as our LinkedIn social media platforms as well. And then also we've got a virtual networking event on the final Friday of the month. The next one is coming up on June the 25th. So if anyone is watching this and hasn't yet registered, we'll be doing a story later this week where you can find more details to register. Absolutely free. Yeah, it's been brilliant, Dawn. I've loved every minute of it. I'm so passionate about this space and really excited to see where the future holds. So in a nutshell, that's where we are now, and we're really looking forward to seeing where it takes us.
I asked you about yourself, and I love how you blended that into really my next question, which was tell me about eVTOLinsights.com. But clearly what it shows to me and everybody out there is your passion about what it is that you do through eVTOL Insights. And I have to tell you, Jason, I am a huge fan. So I get your newsletter and I love your weekly roll up. You didn't mention that. So everybody once a week, they'll kind of post up the top stories, which is a great way just to kind of catch up. And those networking events, we talked about this in Clubhouse. for the non-extroverts in the crowd, it's a little bit difficult because you have to force yourself in a virtual world to kind of go up to a table, and then the heads like Zoom pop up and you see people, which is really cool. But even me as an extrovert, it's a little bit like, okay, I got to go up to the table. But no, it's and you mentioned COVID and this idea of launching in COVID. I'll tell you what, your platform, when you think about it, was really ideal. And my guess is part of your success is because as people were stuck in their houses, they were so hungry for information and connection. And you guys created that. So hats off to you. I love what you're doing. I'm so fortunate
Thank
to
you.
have you on this podcast, and just keep up the great work. One other shout out. I know this coming Friday, one of your guest speakers is going to be Mikey D from
Yeah, yeah.
Drone Industry Systems Corp. Mike is one of my strategic partners, and he's a vertiport in a box. We were on a panel together with the Vertical Flight Society back in March. And honestly, at that time, we talked about this stuff that's going on in the United States, these avigation rights. And I think at the time, people were like, what is she talking? Why are they even talking about this? Is this a VTOL workshop? And now I think people are like, oh, we gotta dredge that up and replay it, because it was great stuff, the people on that panel, including Mike. But what I want to do now, Jason, is kind of get a little bit more into some of what you're seeing in this market, because that's clearly your area of expertise. And so we're about halfway through 2021. I can't believe it already. And
Yes.
so let me just ask you, if you had to boil down like the three most exciting things you've seen in the eVTOL or advanced air mobility kind of market or ecosystem, what would those three things be?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Dawn. And I think, as you rightly said, 2021, I can't believe we're already in June already. And I think also from a journalistic point of view, there's just so much news going around. There's literally days where I'm literally juggling and doing a lot of sort of balancing plates to come up with and make sure we've got all the news in the right space as well. In terms of the stories that have really sort of captured my attention from that as well, and I think it's a really important thing as well, is the SPAC mergers. Joby being the first to be to go through the joint SPAC merger with Reid Hoffman's blank acquisition company as well. Then we had Archer as well. Then also we've got Lilium, and more recently Vertical Aerospace. So those stories captured my interest really because we're starting to see capital investment being put into this industry. We've seen the estimates. Morgan Stanley, I know NASA have done a few things as well, that this market is going to be worth billions and billions of dollars by as early as 2040, maybe 2050. So that really goes to show that there's a lot of people that are very interested in this market. They want to put the capital into these companies so they can not only certify the aircraft, but they can mass produce them at a level that we want it to be, where we can get these commercial services as well. I think Mark Moore, a brilliant electric aviation and many regard as like the father of electric aviation, he said that it could be in excess of $500 billion to build, certify, and mass produce an aircraft. So the kind of numbers that we're seeing, 2.2 billion, 3.2 billion in that regard, that's going to go a long way to helping companies be the difference between going commercial and maybe not sort of reaching that sort of level too. In terms of the other really interesting stories that I've been seeing, is we're starting to see other parts of the ecosystem form as well, and lots of different partnerships. So from Latin America, Felipe Varen Vehicles announcing all the deals with Jaunt Air Mobility. More recently, they've done GE Digital, Aereo, True Weather Solutions. To I know Lilium are working very hard in Europe with I know they've got some German airports in the Europe side as well. Beta Technologies, there, as we were talking on Thursday, Dawn, in our clubhouse, very much gone under the radar, but still Carl Clark and his team, first military airworthiness certificate for their ALIA eVTOL aircraft. That is massive news for the industry, and it really goes to show that there's a lot of excellent work being done. There's so many companies in this industry that I couldn't possibly sort of mention in the time that we've got, but it's really interesting to see that dynamic with the SPACs and the capital investment coming in, but also these partnerships that are developing as well. And as we've always said, Dawn, it takes a village to build this ecosystem. So if we can see more of these partnerships, more of this expertise being shared, then that can only be a good thing, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of, I'm doing public math right now on a Monday morning, at least my time. That's not never done. Okay, but you mentioned so the SPAC merger, so the money coming in. The second thing is kind of these incredible partnerships happening, including you mentioned Felipe Varin. I just had him on the podcast a couple weeks ago. Fun stuff. He's doing amazing things in Colombia and beyond. Um, is there a third thing? If you're going to kind of categorize it, the money rolling in, the partnerships forming, and then kind of, is there a number three? I'm wondering.
I think also as well, yeah, thanks, Dawn. I think it just a wave of thoughts just trying to sort of pop into my head as well. I think the really good thing as well is the we're starting to see the public acceptance things as well. So we're now starting to come out of COVID-19. Touch wood, fingers crossed, everyone is safe. They're starting to get their jabs. We're starting to see a bit of a rollout, certainly in the UK, although we've had our freedom days, they're calling it, a bit pushed back. But we're starting to see normality. Whisk, more recently in New Zealand, they, for the first time, had their Cora eVTOL aircraft at an event where people could ask questions. And even today at the Paris Air Forum, Volocopter did what I believe is the first public demonstration of their Volocopter 2X. So it's not the VoloConnect or the VoloCity, but it's a first public demonstration of the aircraft with attendees watching it as well. So that's going to be a real good sort of thing for the industry, that people can see up close and personal the aircrafts traveling and in the air, and more importantly, Dawn, I guess, hearing it as well, because a lot of challenges from this is sound, and it's going to be so loud, I'm not going to hear myself think. Well, actually, it's quite the opposite. Vertical and Joby have said that their aircraft is going to be perhaps 1,000 times quieter than a conventional helicopter. So Flightcrowd doing brilliant work in the UK in regards to public acceptance and public perception. We know CAMIA doing a load of great work too. We've also got NASA, as we talked about at Clubhouse on Thursday, doing a lot of their workshops and working with local authorities, state and federal too. And that's the really important thing too, because they're going to be the ones that's hopefully going to implement this new type of transport into current transportation systems too, whether it's bus, metro, airports as well. So yeah, the public acceptance is something that I'm certainly seeing, Dawn, and I'm sure that's going to be something that's going to be a very regular topic coming up as we're getting into more face-to-face events in the near future.
I couldn't agree more. And I think we were talking in Clubhouse about this idea that the FAA had a recent symposium in conjunction with the AUVSI International. And, there was a gentleman from South Korea on there talking about how part of their public affairs plan, for lack of a better term, included, having the aircraft at amusement parks, like, so even little kids, because when you think about the different venues and forums, that those are targeting kind of the younger crowd. And I didn't know about the Paris Air Show today. That's super exciting to hear that. Was it Volocopter? Volocopter, you said, is out there. Coming up, growing up in the United States Air Force, career in the military, we have these air shows we put on for that very reason, where they opened an air base that's normally closed to the public, let people come in for 2 or 3 days, have static displays, have demos, as you mentioned, lots of food and kind of interaction. And, it's so important to kind of help people understand what the technology is. And in the military's case, of course, what it is they're doing, and that, at least in the United States, less than 1% of the population is actually part of the military. And so you really could have that civil military divide if the public didn't have an understanding of what it is the military does. And I'd say the same thing for advanced technology. So this is awesome stuff. But you mentioned Flightcrowd, again, another strategic partner. They're doing amazing things. Cami, same thing. But you also mentioned some of the challenges, public acceptance, being one on the flip side, and then noise was another. What would you say would be, in your opinion, the top 3 challenges globally for advancing, advanced air mobility?
Yeah, thanks again, Dawn. And I think there's a whole host of challenges. And I'm not to say that the challenges that I think are the ones that we need to address are really the ones that we need to focus on. There's a lot of work being done to mitigate those challenges that we have. I think the first one, is definitely the public acceptance side. Absolutely. And I can talk at length about that as well. I think the bits we mentioned with our Clubhouse discussion on Thursday is the regulations. I think there really needs to be a regulatory approach to that as well. It's it's a new type of aircraft that we're certifying, never been done before, completely different to sort of like the diesel and piston engines that you would see in conventional aviation. This is electric propulsion, but EASA, FAA, there just needs to be a bit of that challenge to get that universal and industry standard. So we're not having that issue or that sort of, it needs to be transparent, I think, as we said, Dawn, is there's no sort of muddle as to whether we should be going down this regulatory path and the other as well. So we know that different eVTOL aircraft manufacturers are certifying with FAA first, but then maybe go to EASA if they want to expand their commercial operations into Europe, and vice versa. So that's one challenge I think that definitely needs to be resolved. But having said that, again, the EASA, and the FAA are doing some good work at the moment. And if they can just have some sort of guidance as well, I can imagine there'll be a lot of talk between the aircraft manufacturers as well, just to sort of say, well, these are the challenges that we've got. This is what we would need to help make that certification path a little bit smoother. My hat goes off to the certification teams and the engineers that are going through this as well. But that's one point that I think would be really interesting and a challenge that we need to sort of adapt to as well, Dawn. The second one, I think, definitely is infrastructure, and that comes in two parts. We've got the infrastructure for where these eVTOL aircraft are going to land, because if we haven't got the infrastructure for them to land, we don't have a service. So it's really trying to identify where these sites are, but also to see, is there places that we could perhaps utilize existing infrastructure? So another really interesting thing that I've worked on is Skygate in Italy. So part of their infrastructure is actually renovating an existing airport, I think in Torino. So and that really fascinated me, because we're not spending millions and millions of euros or dollars trying to build new vertiports, as they're being called, or new infrastructure demands. We've actually got areas which we can renovate and help to assimilate this new type of mobility as well. But having said that, there are areas that we probably will need to build new eVTOL vertiports as well. Skyports are doing some really good stuff with Volaport. That was the first air taxi demonstration in Singapore in 2019. We know Rex Alexander, brilliant, real expert in terms of infrastructure as well. And that's the really good point that we're seeing as well, is there's a lot of experts out there to talk with city developers, city planners, rather than thinking there's going to be a new building in there. There's all the sort of the planning permissions and things like that. There's a load of experts in this industry that can give a lot of guidance to make that easier for them too. And then the second point I added on top of infrastructure is the charging as well. So there's a lot of battery developments and technology developments with batteries and charging it as well. We want these eVTOL aircraft at the end of the day to be making multiple trips to and from different vertiports, not just 1 or 2 trips a day, but potentially could we be talking double figures, 10 to 20 trips a day? And then once they're at their base, they then need that time to recharge their batteries as well. So there's a lot of things that I think that they're definitely the areas that I think would be really interesting. Joint Air Mobility are working, I believe, with Binghamton University in New York on these extra fast charging solutions. So there's a lot of, again, and that's part, I believe, of an Agility Prime contract as well. So this is, again, a brilliant idea from the US Air Force that's helping to give out these contracts so that the industry can really help to find these solutions to the problems that we have today. And I think finally, just a final point, Dawn, is these proactive questions, isn't it? What can we be doing now to solve those questions that we might have for tomorrow? So if we're looking at it in the future, what issues could come up in the near 2 to 3 years? What can we do to solve it now? We might not have the answer now, technology might not be there, but what can we be doing now to make sure that transition, as we get towards those commercial operations, what can we be doing to make that easier for us all?
Gosh, you said so many things there that we could just peel back and talk about for hours and hours. But the infrastructure piece, I agree. Rex Alexander, 5 Alpha, he's an amazing expert. One of my other strategic partners, he's got that expertise in heliports, and a lot of that translates over to vertiports. I just had Peter Schmidt, the COO of Transcendair, with the Vi aircraft on here last week, just pushed out an article on that in Drone Life. His idea of Vi ports, which would be kind of floating barges, if you will, like walkable from urban centers and things like that. And then, of course, Mikey D and DISC and kind of like rooftop vertiports or whatever that's going to look like. And there's so many different models. One thing that people are saying, some of the companies you mentioned, like their PR campaign, for lack of a better term, is a little bit some people would call them elitist, right?
Mm.
Like, so it looks like, hey, look, living the high life with my martini, like taking the, avoiding the plebeians, by just flying over them. And
Yeah.
that imagery and that kind of, marketing campaign is really having, I think, an impact on some people's thinking
Mm.
when it comes to funding, because
Mm.
yes, all this infrastructure you're talking about is great. Someone's got to pay for it.
Mm.
And, some people are pushing back and saying, hey, you know what? The public shouldn't be paying for this, the taxpayers, because look, why are we paying for the martini guy to be flying
Yeah.
over, flying over us, and we're sweating away on a bus for
Mm.
hours on end. So, I think, some of these challenges you mentioned, public acceptance, part of that is just PR and marketing. And what is it we're saying? Because to me, if you can show this as a societal good, and I think that's what Felipe's trying to show in Colombia,
Mm.
now you've got a different reason for governments and for people to care. So I think we just, as an industry, we need to be real careful on the imagery, on the PR, on what we are saying these things can do and who's going to be using them.
Mm.
One thing I just noticed, I read an article the other day, you mentioned SPAC earlier.
Mm.
Um, that a lot of this money seems to be rolling into like the passenger type
Mm.
aircraft, which is interesting because you think that would take longer to certify and actually get people up in there
Mm.
versus cargo.
Mm.
I always assumed cargo would be kind of like the first use case. What are you thinking?
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Dawn. And just to sort of you make some brilliant points about the public acceptance thing as well. And it's really key to make sure we're telling people this isn't going to be for the rich and wealthy. This isn't going to be a service that's going to be the way those that can afford the executive travel as well. We want this to be accessible to absolutely everyone, from the right at the bottom, right the way to the top. We want everyone to be able to save time. No one wants to be sitting in congested traffic jams. So yeah, I just wanted to make a point, and that's a really good sort of address that you made as well. In terms of the cargo aspect, absolutely, yeah. I think using cargo as an air logistics is a brilliant first use case. I think more importantly for safety, because we're not going to be putting passengers or people in these aircraft. I know it more than likely will be sort of the autonomous idea of it as well. Now, again, that raises up another challenge because, again, autonomy and technology as well. But I think air cargo and air use cases is brilliant. We're already seeing that in play now with Skyports, I think Swoop Aero, with Valancy doing some great work in North Carolina in the US, Skyports with delivering COVID-19 medical supplies to isolated communities too. So we're already starting to see use cases for air cargo with eVTOL drones, and the feedback that they've had has been very impressive because, again, very quick, can reduce a journey that would otherwise take several hours in the car, can be done in 12 minutes. So I've always said, and I'm always happy to be given some other bits and some other ways as to why that isn't the case, but it would be cargo air logistics first as that first use case. Test the technology, test to make sure it works, that we've got all the things in place, and then we can start to learn from that data to then put into the passenger aircraft and air taxis as well. It's not, Rome wasn't built in a day, it's going to take time, but if we get that technology and we get that data now, that's going to make it so easy and so much better for us to before going straight into piloted and passenger aircraft as well. So yeah, I completely agree, Dawn. I think that's definitely the way to go in my opinion, and looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Yeah, you mentioned NASA now a couple times, and they're doing some incredible research and development in this arena. And in fact, they just finished their SIO demonstrations, systems integration. I think it's called systems integration operationalization or something. And Bell's APT-70, which is a cargo drone, flew medical supplies autonomously in Dallas. And it was this idea of rapid medical transport and kind of showing that use case commercially, and great stuff. I mean, I think, we mentioned some of the challenges. One thing you didn't mention, and I think it's the same for small drones as it is for large, is some of the technology. I don't know that it's all there. If it's all there, it hasn't been really proven to be effective in all cases, like detect and avoid technologies, command and control links. Like we can, I think one of the findings of the Bell demo was that during beyond visual line of sight landings, they would lose link, and because of some ground clutter and other things with the radar. And that's a little frightening, right? Like you can't be losing link in general, like with cargo, but certainly not with people in there. So, you know, you're right. Rome was not built in a day, and this is going to take a while, but it's so exciting to see all these development happening. And speaking of beyond visual line of sight, I'm sure you're tracking the FAA just announced their advisory rulemaking committee on that. Now, obviously it's small drones, but this is the first step because cargo drones, larger aircraft, beyond visual line of sight, how is that all going to work? You know, I think there's a continuum there. And Canada obviously has a whole host of R&D going on in that arena. My friends in Australia, you know, and I'm sure you just saw the NEAT policy, the Australian government's new national emerging aviation technologies policy, the NEAT policy. I love that acronym. Where you know, and what I loved about it was a couple things. Number one, they included eVTOL aircraft in the planning, and number two, oh crazy, privacy and environmental conditions. You know, like so. You know, and that's just not noise. That's also like wildlife and habitats. I mean, we saw that horrible post. I'm sure you've seen it where a drone crashed into a wildlife habitat and thousands of eggs, bird eggs were compromised. You know, so those kind of stories not helpful. Thinking about that and making sure we're doing the right thing, all good stuff. So anyway, all right, well, we are kind of getting short on time here. So let me ask you this, just kind of maybe two final questions. The first one is, what are you the most excited about right now in this industry?
Yeah, very good question, Dawn. There's a whole host of things that really excites me, but I think the main thing for me personally is just really watching this industry grow. From you know, when we had the first Uber Elevate summits, sort of a few years ago now, where we saw, you know, for example, the Bell Nexus up close and personal, fascinating aircraft as well. And I just love how the industry is now starting to mature. As we spoke in our earlier conversation, Dawn, we're seeing a lot of capital investment being invested into the industry, but we're also seeing new contenders, new companies emerge that are saying we're building this eVTOL aircraft. So I don't think that we'll have, you know, 400 different aircraft directors, as I know the Vertical Flight Society has got. I think we're going to narrow it down into perhaps 20, 30, it's going to be a very competitive market. But I'm just really excited about seeing the industry grow. We're seeing all this technology developments, and, you know, I'm very passionate about this industry. So seeing a partnership or seeing, you know, visual test flights, visual designs of aircrafts, and seeing that we're going to be closer to doing these sort of demos and these launch of these services really excites me. So I, like probably a whole host of people, cannot wait to be there on the ground when we see one of these aircrafts take flight. So hopefully it's not long before we have to wait, and pending COVID and we can do it all safely. Yeah, I'd love to head over to the US and you know, connect with you, Dawn, face to face, and some of my contacts that I've already made in the US too. So very much looking forward to that.
Well, I love that. And, you know, so two things tagging onto that. One is I think Europe, you're going to see some of these flights in the fall. They're doing their GOF, their Golf 2.0 demonstrations as part of U-Space. And one of those test scenarios, I believe, is an eVTOL aircraft from EHang. And I forget what country that's going to be flying through, but really big deal. So I'm ecstatic to see that. And number two, what I'm really excited about, and I'm biased being, you know, former military, is finally, I think people are starting to make the connection between the commercial industry and the defense industry and that symbiosis. Because, I mean, I've been in the national security arena for so long, and people on the national security side said, we don't see why commercial drones or, you know, any of those industries are relevant at all. And I'm thinking, like, cybersecurity and other national security issues aside, okay, the bad side, like the good side is these partnerships where, like you mentioned, Beta getting the first military certification, which is a stepping stone to FAA certification. I mean, this is huge. People are just starting to have the light bulbs come on, see these opportunities, additional partnerships. I'm just so excited for what this can mean, not only, you know, for the commercial sector, but also on the battlefield, because these technologies will save lives. And, you know, Peter Schmidt from Transcend, perfect example, you know, his VI aircraft in autonomous mode, you know, for a personnel recovery mission that to be like 4 times or however many times faster than a regular helicopter with less people on board that can get shot out of the sky. all good, right? So really excited about
Yeah.
all of this. All right, so you got 30 seconds, your 30-second elevator speech to wrap up. What else do you want to tell the crowd that's out there, hopefully watching us?
Yeah, absolutely. So, thanks ever so much, Dawn, for this opportunity. For everyone who wants to catch up on the latest industry developments, evtoolinsights.com is our website. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. Head to our website later this week for our virtual networking event, which is on June the 25th, completely free to register. 90 minutes of networking. We've got two 50-minute presentations. We're also on Clubhouse every Thursday, 5 o'clock British Summer Time, and we're also on WhatsApp and Signal. You can sign up to our newsletter, which comes out every Friday. But yeah, always happy to hear from anyone. My email address, editorial@evtoolinsights.com. So look forward to connect. And thanks you, Dawn, for, as always, your hard work and all your efforts in this space. It's greatly appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much again for being here. You know, you mentioned a couple of things, and that's how I'll end this podcast, is just to remind everybody that we are also on Clubhouse, Drone Law Connections, every Thursday, 11 a.m. Mountain, 1 p.m., excuse me, Eastern. So this Thursday, we're going to have Rex Alexander, who you've heard about a couple times on this podcast now, from 5 Alpha, talking about vertiports and infrastructure, and Yolanka Wolf, both from CAMI, or the Community Air Mobility Initiative. So they'll be on Clubhouse Thursday, and then God willing, a live stream next Monday for Drones and Dawn. And if not, I'm going to be recording it anyway. So anyway, more to follow there. Join us. And I guess that's all for now out here.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Dawn.